She told me she was with a patient. Her tone was soft, almost weary, the way it usually is when she's had a long shift, and for a moment I let myself believe her without question. After all, she's a nurse. Long nights, sudden emergencies, calls that pull her away at odd hours. That's a reality I've come to accept in our marriage. But that night, something in her voice didn't sit right. It wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't say. Usually, she tells me details without me asking. The patient's condition, the little moments that touched her heart, the way she worries about outcomes. But this time, she was vague. Too vague. I brushed it off. Told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself that I should trust her, because if there's one person in the world I've always trusted, it's her. Still, after we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to watch TV. Tried to focus on anything else. But my mind kept circling back to the strange pause she had before answering, the way her breath caught for just a split second, as if she was thinking of the right words rather than just speaking the truth. And then, something small but nagging popped into my head. She had borrowed my phone charger that morning and forgot to take it back, which meant her phone would eventually need charging, and she'd probably plug it in at home later. I could check her GPS history. I wasn't planning to accuse her. I wasn't even planning to say anything. I just needed to know for my own sanity. I hated the feeling I had, that gnawing itch in my chest that something wasn't right. I told myself, if she's where she says she is, I'll feel stupid. I'll apologize to myself in the mirror, and I'll never doubt her again. But if she's not, then I don't know what I'll do. The idea that my nurse wife, the woman who cared for strangers with such tenderness, might be lying to me was something I didn't even want to let into my head. Yet there it was, pounding against the walls of my thoughts. My hand was already reaching for my phone before I'd fully made the decision, my heart beating harder with each tap, each swipe. I opened the GPS log, expecting to see the hospital address. But I didn't know if you've ever laid next to someone who made you feel completely alone. Then maybe this story isn't just mine, it's ours. And if that's true, subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard by those who understand. The address staring back at me was not the hospital. It wasn't even close. My chest tightened in a way I can't describe, like my body knew before my mind could process it. I blinked, thinking maybe I misread it. Maybe the GPS glitched. I zoomed in on the map, tracing the blue like a detective chasing a lead, and there it was, a location I recognized but couldn't immediately place. I sat there in the dim light of our living room, the soft from the refrigerator in the background, the clock ticking louder than usual, and I kept staring at that address, as if staring would make it turn into the hospital. But it didn't. It was a residential area. My brain started flipping through mental files, trying to connect that street name to something. And then it hit me. Months ago, at one of her hospital charity events, she introduced me to a man, a doctor, tall, charming, with a too-easy smile. He'd shaken my hand and looked at her in a way I noticed, but didn't comment on at the time. Dr. Collins. Or was it Dr. Carter? No, Dr. Raphael. The name slid into my mind with a strange heaviness. I remembered his laugh, the way his hand lingered a second too long on her shoulder, the way she had brushed it off when I teased her about it later. And now, staring at the GPS, I realized this was his street. My hands were clammy, my throat dry, and 100 rationalizations screamed in my head at once. Maybe she was doing a home checkup. Maybe one of his relatives was sick. Maybe she was delivering something from the hospital. But the part of me that knows her better than anyone else, the part of me that can read her smallest micro-expressions, was whispering a truth I didn't want to hear. I could have called her right then, could have demanded an explanation, could have said, I know you're not at the hospital, but I didn't. I just sat there, letting the weight of that address crush me slowly, because once you say something out loud, you can't take it back. Once you pull the thread, the whole thing unravels. I stared at my phone for what felt like hours, the glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes, until finally I set it down face down on the couch beside me. My heart was pounding in my ears, my breathing uneven, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt truly alone, even though she was just across town. I told myself I would wait, that maybe there was an innocent explanation. But deep down, a cold certainty was already building in my gut. I don't care about algorithms. I care about the people listening to this who are bleeding silently like I did. If you've ever held back tears just to protect someone who didn't protect you, subscribe. You don't have to do this alone anymore. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that I was letting my imagination run wild. But every time I reopened the app, the little blue that stayed in the same place, unmoving, unshaken by my hope that maybe it would drift back toward the hospital. It was like it was mocking me, frozen on that quiet street. Under the warm glow of a porch light, I could almost see in my mind. I imagined her car parked there. Imagined her stepping out with that same tired smile she always had after long shifts, except this time. The exhaustion wouldn't come from saving lives. It would come from living a lie. The minutes passed in slow motion. I refreshed the app again, and every time my stomach sank deeper. The GPS wasn't wrong. It never was. This was the same app we'd used to find each other in busy parking lots. The same one she used when she was driving home late. So I could watch her a little inch closer and feel relief knowing she was safe. Now, it was the same, but instead of comfort, it was carving deep lines of dread into my chest. My mind kept replaying our last conversation before she left for her so-called night shift. She had kissed me, told me she loved me, and adjusted her scrubs like it was any other night. There had been no hesitation in her voice, no tell in her body language. That was the part that chilled me. If she was lying, she was doing it with the ease of breathing. I started zooming out on the map, looking at the surrounding streets, tracing possible routes she could take to the hospital, as if maybe she was just stopping there briefly. But nothing about it made sense. This wasn't on the way. It wasn't even close. I remembered the way her phone had been buzzing more lately, how she would turn the screen away when I walked by, how she'd sometimes smile at messages she never shared. I had noticed all of it, filed away in the probably nothing drawer of my mind, but now that drawer was spilling open, and every memory was demanding to be re-examined. The sound of my own heartbeat was deafening, and I found myself wondering if she even thought about me in that moment, wherever she was. Was she laughing? Was she talking in that soft, empathetic tone she usually saved for me when I was hurting? Was she touching someone else the way she used to touch me? I didn't want to think it, but the GPS kept forcing me to. It didn't care about trust, about marriage vows, about the years we'd built together. It only cared about truth, cold, factual, impossible to argue with truth. And that truth was that she was not where she said she would be. I could have driven there. I could have confronted her in real time. But my legs felt like lead, my body locked in place by some primal fear confirming the worst. Because if I saw it with my own eyes, there would be no more room for denial, and denial, as twisted as it sounds, was still giving me something to hold on to. So I just sat there, staring at that, watching my marriage unravel on a screen, and the worst part was she had no idea I knew. I must have stared at that screen for over an hour, each passing minute building a pressure in my chest that felt like it might crack my ribs open. My thumb hovered over the call button so many times I lost count, but every time I thought about hearing her voice, I froze. Because what would I even say? Hey, I'm tracking you? That wasn't how trust was supposed to work in a marriage. But trust was already bleeding out, and I was just standing there, watching it die. I imagined her phone lighting up with my name, her looking down, startled for a second, then quickly composing herself with whatever excuse she'd been rehearsing. Maybe she'd say she had to stop for a patient's family member. Maybe she'd claim her phone's GPS was glitching, that technology wasn't perfect. And maybe I'd pretend to believe her, because pretending was easier than shattering everything we had in one conversation. I thought about driving there. The route was burned into my mind now. A straight shot down 2 main roads, less than 20 minutes if I hit green lights. I pictured myself pulling up, seeing her car, walking up to that door, and knocking. I'd pictured her opening it, surprise flashing in her eyes, quickly replaced by that guarded look I'd started seeing more often lately. Maybe I'd see him behind her. Maybe he'd be wearing the same hospital scrubs. Maybe not. Maybe he'd look at me like he knew exactly who I was, and didn't care. But every version of that scene ended the same way. With me standing in the wreckage of my marriage, no way to put the pieces back together. And so I didn't move. My body stayed anchored to couch, my phone balanced on my knee, the glowing map casting a pale light into the dark room. It was surreal, the kind of moment where you're so aware of your own stillness that it feels like the air itself is pressing down on you. Every noise in the house became louder, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock. Even my own breathing sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. I kept imagining her walking the front door hours from now, her face lit by the warm porch light, her voice soft, her steps heavy from work. Would I confront her then? Or would I swallow it again, letting the lie live another day? The truth was, I didn't know. I was caught in this strange limbo where knowledge and action refused to meet. Knowing felt like a wound. Acting felt like ripping it open wider. And so I stayed there, paralyzed, holding my phone like it was both a weapon and the shield in a battle I never asked for. Outside, the night deepened. Somewhere in the city, she was still at that address, still off the map of our marriage, and I was here, counting the seconds until the sound of her key in the lock would force me to decide whether it be the man who asked or the man who stayed silent. And deep down, I already feared which one I'd be. The sound of her key in the lock didn't just startle me. It sent a sharp jolt straight through my spine, like my body had been bracing for it all night without realizing. I had been sitting in the exact same spot for hours, phone still in my hand. The GPS app still glowing faintly on the screen, the little that was her phone finally moving toward home not more than 30 minutes ago. I'd imagined this moment 100 different ways while I waited, rehearsing lines in my head, choosing words that sounded calm, reasonable, non-accusatory, and then tearing them apart because none of them felt strong enough to hold the weight of what I'd seen. But as the door creaked open, everything in me went silent. She stepped in, her eyes landing on me almost instantly, and for a moment, there was this flash of something in her face. Not the exhaustion she usually wore after a shift, not even surprise. It was quicker than that, like a split-second calculation, a silent inventory of whether I knew something or not. And then, just as fast, it was gone, replaced by a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey," she said, voice soft, too soft, as if trying to cushion the air between us before the conversation could start. She set her bag down carefully, her movements deliberate, like someone walking through a minefield, and I noticed her scrubs were neatly folded over her arm instead of on her body. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. "Long night?" I asked, and my voice didn't even sound like mine. It was steady control, but every muscle in my jaw was locked tight. She nodded, giving a vague, "Yeah, emergencies," and I could hear the gap between the words and the truth, as if they were separated by miles. I could smell something faint in the air, not antiseptic, not that sterile hospital scent I'd grown used to when she came home from work. It was warmer, heavier, almost sweet, and my stomach twisted at the thought of where it might have come from. I wanted to ask. God, I wanted to ask. But the second my mouth opened, I felt the weight of all those imagined endings pressing down on me again. I saw the explosion that would follow, the denials, the tears, whether real or not, I wouldn't know anymore. The accusations flipped back at me, making me question my own sanity. And then what? We'd stand here in the ruins, breathing heavy, staring at a love we didn't know how to resurrect. Instead, I closed my mouth, swallowed the storm, and just nodded. "You hungry?" she asked, and I hated how normal she sounded, how easily she could pivot to small talk while my heart was chewing itself alive inside my chest. I watched her walk past me into the kitchen, her back turned, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and I thought about the man at that address. Was he watching her hair like this too? Did he run his hands through it? Did she let him? I stayed in my seat, my hands gripping my phone so hard my knuckles were white, the last location still open like an open wound I couldn't close. I knew if I looked away, if I let it fade into the background, I'd lose my nerve. And maybe that's why I didn't get up to follow her. I just sat there, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between us, the sound of cabinets opening and closing in the kitchen, and this aching certainty settling into my bones that whatever she brought back from that night, it wasn't for me. She came back into the living room with a glass of water, placing it gently on the coffee table in front of me, her movements slow, deliberate, like she was trying to project calm into the room. as if the air itself needed to believe nothing was wrong. She sat across from me, tucking one leg beneath her, her eyes briefly meeting mine, before drifting away, landing on the TV remote, the coasters, anywhere but my face. It was a rough night, she started, and her voice carried this carefully measured weariness, like an actress stepping into a role she'd rehearsed countless times. We had a patient crash right at the end of my shift. Had to stay and stabilize before I could leave. Her words were smooth, fluid, almost too perfect, like she'd been practicing them in the car. But then, without thinking, she added, I left around 1:30, and the moment she said it, I felt my entire body stiffen. 1:30. I knew from the GPS that she had been parked at that residential address until after 2. My mind immediately split into two parts. The part that wanted to leap on the inconsistency right there, to tear the truth out of her with raw, unfiltered questions, and the part that held me back, whispering that patience would give me more. I decided to wait, to let her keep talking, because lies, I'd learned, have a way of unraveling themselves if you give them enough rope. She went on about the supposed emergency, using just enough medical jargon to make the story sound legitimate, but never offering details that could actually be checked. She didn't mention the patient's name, the room number, or even the condition that had caused the crash. Her eyes flicked toward me occasionally, searching for micro-reactions, but I kept my expression still, my voice neutral, because I knew that if she sensed even a hint of suspicion, she'd start sealing up the cracks before I could look through them. Then it happened. The first slip, that wasn't just a matter of timing. She reached for her bag to pull out her phone, saying she needed to set an alarm for the morning, and for the briefest second, the home screen lit up. I saw it. The name, Raphael. No doctor this time, no formal title, just Raphael. A single notification preview flashing a line of text too quick for me to read before she swiped it away like it was an instinct. And yet, I didn't miss the way her thumb lingered over the screen, the way her shoulders tightened just slightly as if she knew I'd seen it. She put the phone face down on the couch beside her, something she never used to do, and suddenly the smell in the air, the altered timeline, the vague details, it all started to weave into something that felt too heavy to be coincidence. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear in my ears, but my voice stayed steady when I finally said, 1:30, huh? Just 3 words, tossed out like a casual remark, but her reaction wasn't casual at all. She froze for half a second before forcing a laugh, saying, yeah, why? And I knew then, in that moment, that I wasn't imagining any of this, that there was something or someone pulling her away from me, and that her story was just a mask she kept adjusting to fit the version of herself she wanted me to see. That if this sounds like your life, stop pretending you're fine. Stop hiding it like I did. Subscribe, not for me, but for every person who thought they were crazy, until the truth finally shattered them. You're safe here. We see you. I leaned back against the couch, pretending to be comfortable, pretending I didn't just feel the ground shift beneath me. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional creak of the house settling. But in that silence, her breathing sounded too controlled, too evenly spaced, like she was deliberately keeping it steady. My mind was a storm, flashing between the GPS coordinates on my phone, the smell on her scrubs that didn't belong to antiseptic or latex gloves, and the way the name Raphael had lit up her screen like a flare in the dark. I kept my gaze soft, my posture loose, because if I confronted her now, she'd retreat into whatever walls she'd been building for weeks, maybe months. So I decided to draw her out instead, to invite her into a conversation she couldn't script. Rough night, huh? I asked, my voice casual, almost sympathetic, as if I believed every word she'd said. Her eyes flickered toward me, then away, then back again, like she was checking the temperature of the room before stepping in. Yeah, she said, and then, almost too quickly, you wouldn't believe the chaos. She reached for her phone again, not to check it, but to move it farther away, out of reach, almost like she didn't trust herself not to look at it while I was sitting here. That small movement said more than any of her words. And that's when I saw it. Not in her hands, not in her gestures, but in her eyes. You can lie with your mouth. You can lie with your tone. But your eyes tell on you. Hers were tired, but not from lack of sleep. They were heavy with something else. The kind of weight you carry when you've been holding on to two different lives and trying to keep them from colliding. When she looked at me, I didn't see guilt in the way you see it in movies, with tears and trembling lips. I saw calculation. I saw her searching for what I knew, measuring what she could admit without giving away the rest. It was like watching someone stand at the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to step forward into truth or back into the safety of lies. I decided to push just enough. "It's funny," I said lightly. "I thought I saw you on the GPS around too. Must have been wrong." Her head tilted, her lips parting just slightly, and for a fraction of a second, just a fraction, her eyes widened before she forced them back into a neutral gaze. "GPS isn't always accurate," she replied, the words rolling off her tongue too easily, too rehearsed. And there was again that flash in her eyes, like a door swinging open for just a heartbeat before slamming shut. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, letting my eyes lock with hers. I didn't blink. I wanted her to feel the weight of my attention, the unspoken message that I was no longer the man who accepted half-truths and vague stories. She shifted in her seat, crossing and uncrossing her legs, her fingers toying with the hem of her scrubs as if she needed something to do with her hands. The silence stretched between us, taut and unbreakable, and in that space, I realized something chilling. She wasn't going to confess because of guilt. If she confessed at all, it would be because she thought it would serve her. And that made me question not just where she'd been that night, but how long she'd been playing this game. In that moment, her eyes told me everything her mouth refused to, that somewhere between her night shifts and her whispered, "I love yous." I'd stopped being a man she came home to and started being a man she lied to. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. There comes a moment in every lie where it can no longer survive under the weight of reality. For weeks, maybe months, she had balanced her life like a tightrope walker. One foot in our marriage, the other in whatever shadowed world she thought she could keep hidden. But that night, in the stillness of our living room, I felt the rope snap. She was sitting across from me, her body angled slightly away, as though she could physically turn herself from the truth. The lamp behind her cast a soft glow, but it didn't reach her face the way it used to. Her features were sharp, guarded, like every smile she'd ever given me had been folded up and locked away. I took a deep breath, and instead of asking another question, I simply said her name, slowly, deliberately, letting the sound of it hang in the air like a challenge. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, and for the first time that night, there was no flicker, no calculated glance, no rehearsed composure. There was just stillness. I reached into my pocket, not breaking eye contact, and pulled out my phone. With a few swipes, I opened the GPS log, the glowing blue tracing a path she hadn't mentioned in her carefully crafted alibi. I slid the phone across the table toward her, the screen facing up. "Tell me I'm wrong," I said, my voice steady, almost too calm. She looked down, and I watched her chest rise and fall in a slow, deliberate breath. When her eyes came back to mine, they were different. Something in them had broken, not in shame, but in the quiet resignation of someone who knows the game is over. And then she smiled. Not the warm, familiar smile I had once fallen for, but a cold, almost pitying curve of her lips, as if I was the one who didn't understand the rules. "You don't want to know," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. But I did want to know. I wanted to hear it, to drag the truth out into the light, where it couldn't hide anymore. "Say it," I pressed. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving mine, and for the first time since she walked through that door, she seemed relieved. And then, like a dam breaking, the words spilled out. She didn't give me details in a confessionary tone, didn't cry, or beg for forgiveness. Instead, she painted it in broad strokes, enough to confirm every suspicion, every late-night doubt, every cold space in our bed. The hospital shifts, the emergency calls, the nights she came home smelling like something that didn't belong to me, all of it had been real, but not for the reasons she told me. And in that moment, I realized the cruelest part wasn't betrayal itself. It was the ease with which she had lived in the space between love and deceit, as if my trust was nothing more than a prop in her performance. My hands were steady, my voice calm, but inside, something final had shifted. The version of me who had waited up for her, who had believed the stories, who had defended her in conversations with friends. That man was gone. I wasn't sitting across from my wife anymore. I was sitting across from a stranger wearing her face. And as she spoke, the mask she had worn for so long finally cracked, not because she couldn't hold it up, but because she no longer needed to. By the time she finished, there was no shouting, no tears, no desperate pleas. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when two people both know something has ended, and neither is willing to pretend otherwise. I stood, slowly, the legs of my chair scraping against the floor, and for a long moment I just looked at her, memorizing the last image of the woman I had once thought I knew. Then, without a word, I walked away, not because I didn't have more to say, but because I knew nothing I said would matter anymore till you've come this far. That means something. You felt this. You lived it. Maybe not this exact story, but your own version of it. So if you're still here, still breathing under the weight of something they'll never apologize for, hit subscribe. Because no one should walk through this kind of betrayal alone. And if no one else says it, I will. I'm glad you're still here.